Mariam drew the curtains back from the window leading to the road, leaning her head out to take in her first school-free breath. She had graduated from university yesterday, 29th August 2030, and celebrations were in order. Over a decade and a half ago, her country had agreed, along with the entire membership of the African Union, that committing to girls' and women's education was not an unavoidable priority, but an exciting investment in the future. In 2017, the newly elected government of President Chietza Ba, the country's first woman head of state, made sure women's rights was at the top of the agenda and that true democracy breathed life. A healthy governance framework invested in the full participation of all citizens, particularly marginalized groups, was firmly put in place. The government began to pay more than lip service to women's education by fully resourcing universal access to high school and college education, whilst developing public educational institutions across the country. Government also collaborated with ethical business, civil society groups, and feminist scholars to implement courses that were flexible to meet the needs of a diverse range of communities. Teams of Africa's leading teachers and creative thinkers had come together to design options for model curricula that incorporated feminist approaches to thinking. As part of the national curriculum, funding was invested in developing the technology sector, and the government prioritized ICT training for girls and women. Mariam herself had begun developing apps while in secondary school. She was mentored through her university program by a leading Ugandan net mobile app developer who was part of the first wave of women tech social entrepreneurs in the mid-2010s, an experience that introduced her to a deep network of African women pioneering communications technology for women's rights and social good. As a young woman in a wheelchair, Mariam's own focus was on technologies for women with disabilities. All the apps she was developing with her young women's tech collective, Jua Tech, used devices run by wind, solar, or biofuel. The majority of energy production was now renewable, produced low carbon emissions, and largely diminished the need for continental debates on climate change. This was now such a common part of life on the continent, so much so that people had forgotten what the diesel generators sounded like. It was due to these societal transformations over the years that Mariam, like so many young people, was able to tap into available resources and start a business. The Ministries of Labour and Technology worked together with regional economic communities, the Environmental Protection Authority, and multinational companies to develop and implement protective laws and policies that limited the exploitation of employees and resources and ensured that trade relations were solid. Through active engagement with these laws and policies, an inclusive and exciting workforce developed across 65% of the continent. Access and availability of financial resources in the country became diverse, universal, and egalitarian, with a well-integrated and effective infrastructure. This led to a significant decline in poverty. People could also access justice mechanisms that were universally accountable and transparent. Land used to be something everyone fought over, and more often than not, what government and business people grabbed for their own use. The majority of women parliament had taken steps to stop this. Land reform, promised since independence, was finally bearing fruit. As a direct result of the work of women who lobbied over the last 3 decades for sustainable protection over Africa's forests and water bodies, a large percentage of the land was arable. This increased peaceful relations and drastically reduced conflicts over scarce natural resources. Similarly, access to water became universal and safe to consume. Mariam knew that the lives of women like her, living with disabilities in the poorer areas of the city, had not always been so full of opportunity. The movement of differently abled Africans was strong now, with pioneering feminists like Aissatou Cissé and Agnes Chindimba breaking ground, demanding political voice and helping build solidarity with other women to put the human rights issues on the African agenda. Family structures, especially through the spread of ICT, began to shift to embrace digital and virtual forms of kinship, making family structures diverse and suited to individual and collective needs. Youth and feminist movements were robust and growing in impact. They built their base of allies, including in the progressive faith communities, to build respect and support for cultural ideas that were tolerant, adaptive, and anti-patriarchal. President Barr's government also focused on participatory and fair access to resources. There was a growing network of public wellness women's centers run by government and staffed by fantastic healthcare workers, who she always found were supportive of her own concerns as a young woman in a wheelchair. Not only did the healthcare system lead to a massive decrease in maternal and infant mortality, but also many of her friends had gotten great information and support on sexual health. The centers were particularly effective in helping combat the rise of cancers in East and West Africa through cancer screening and treatment programs. Although Mariam was still young and had relatively little money, she always chose to buy locally farmed vegetables from one of the women's agricultural cooperatives. Everyone knew that genetically modified foods were linked to the spike in cancers and also made farmers spend a lot of their money on supplies from agribusiness companies. An activist organization in her own country had listened to the grievances of farmers and managed to win a court case against the use of GMOs, setting a precedent across other African countries to reject the production of genetically modified foods by big multinational corporations. Mariam's local government representative was in her 30s and very interested to get all the residents of the area engaged in activities that supported the local economy and benefited the environment. This inspired Mariam to start thinking of developing an app to link all the women urban organic farmers in different neighborhoods and create an information zone for people wanting to buy locally farmed vegetables and fruits. Day 1 of her life beyond university, and Mariam was feeling excited.